All right, so we encourage you to continue the conversation in the chat throughout. But in the interest of time, I know we've only got a half hour with you all today, so I'm going to get started and kick off by just introducing myself. I'm Ariel Gallipo. I'm joined today by Matthew Erickson, and we're the co-founders of Your Story. We're so excited to share this time with you today to explore other ways of relating to our work. So before we dive into the topic at hand, I just want to acknowledge what's going on in the world today. Due to the pandemic, many of us find ourselves without work or having to opt out of work to care for families or children. And this can be a challenging and disorienting time. But as Matthew will talk about, these moments of struggle offer an opportunity for reflection, for reorientation, and reimagination. So whether you're currently working and hoping to find more meaning in your work, or in the job search process and trying to just navigate through, we hope that today's session will provide you some clarity and perspective on your path forward. We understand that supporting your basic needs is vital and work as a means to make money is necessary, but we feel that this singular view denies us one of the most important means for fulfillment in our lives. So just to orient, what we're going to cover in today's session is a little bit about the underlying assumptions about work. How did we get to this current understanding today? We're then going to identify some of the elements of work that motivate and engage us, and present 3 new perspectives of how you may opt to engage in your work. And hopefully some of those will be new. Finally, we'll do some self-reflective activities to help you move towards your calling. This topic is really important to us at Your Story because we believe that our main motivation for living is to fulfill a purpose, for our lives to have meaning. And reimagining work as a calling is the first step in which you can realize your potential to positively impact the world and lead a meaningful life. This is really important to me because it's a part of my story, and I've been on that same journey of living a meaningful life. I was a student of Matthew's about 5 years ago when I enrolled in his self-leadership course during my MBA program at Providence College. I met Matthew at a time when I was feeling disappointed, exhausted, disengaged, and depleted by my work. I was living on autopilot, trying to fulfill expectations of what I thought I should be doing, working at a stable, well-paying job. Matthew's work in the classroom literally changed the trajectory of my life as I ended a relationship, moved to Boston, and started a career in human resources. This led me to my most recent role as a program director at a mission-driven startup. I learned a lot through that experience, but I also came to realize that I wanted to do more to fulfill my purpose, not someone else's. So I reached back out to Matthew, and that's how Your Story was born. Together, we're fulfilling our vision to create a world in which everyone is driven to fulfill their purpose and calling. Your Story will offer multidisciplinary self-development experiences that put you at the center. So now that you know who we are, we'd love to hear from you. So we're going to kick off with a session with a survey to help us to understand your current relationship with work. So what dominates your relationship with work? We're going to take a brief survey and have you respond by using this poll that I will put into the chat. You'll just need to copy and paste this into a new tab in your browser. And bear with me because I know this can be a little bit clunky, but I promise it is worth it. So feel free to copy and paste that link into your web browser. And hopefully, as you all start to respond, we should see that populate on the screen here. Frustration. I can definitely resonate with that emotion when it comes to work. All right, frustration seems to be a big one. Happy, alienation, hard, negative. We've got a variety of different emotions here. It's great to sort of see how we all currently relate to work. I love to see some motivation and passion in here as well. So hopefully there are folks in the room who have started on this journey to work as a calling. Great to see some of these dominant emotions, stress, anxiety. I think these are things that I can resonate with in my experience as well. So thank you all so much for participating in this survey. I think it's really powerful just to get an understanding of where we're at today and check in with ourselves and understand that current relationship. So with that, Matthew, I will turn it over to you to talk to us a little bit about how we got to this current understanding and way of relating to work.
Okay, welcome everyone. So glad to see so many faces and a lot of familiar faces. So greatly appreciative of that. So I feel I'm blessed to be co-founder of Your Story with Ariel, in which we complement our strengths and draw upon our shared purpose to support others in realizing their human potential and impacting the world. So today I kind of want to give you an example of the work we do. And so much of leadership and self-development is becoming consciousness of things inside us and shared among us in our everyday ways of talking with one another that often exist below the surface of our awareness, but they drive our actions and the outcomes. So we believe through increasing our level of awareness, it allows us to then choose to continue. I don't know what I'm getting at. To continue based on these unconscious beliefs and on the outcomes we're getting, or developing new ways of thinking, feeling, and acting that produce more meaningful outcomes. So, right, just always looking at outcomes. And what leads to the outcomes in our lives are our beliefs, our feelings, and those drive our actions and then drive our outcomes. So with that, I want to start with a quote from comedian Jim Carrey. And interestingly, he went through a period of depression and I would say maybe a spiritual awakening. And he came to realize, he said, so many of us choose our path out of fear disguised as practicality. And right now he does a lot of work of, like, who am I, which is interesting. So what I'm going to draw on below is a little bit from the work of this guy named Barry Schwartz. So unfortunately for many of us, work is monotonous, meaningless, and sometimes soul deadening. And some of the adjectives you guys spoke for your emotions are consistent with this. This year of Gallup, in their yearly random sample of full and part-time employees in the US who work for an employer, found that 37% of workers are engaged, while 49% are not engaged, meaning they are psychologically unattached to their work. They're also on the lookout for better employment opportunities and will quickly leave their company for a better offer. And 14% are actually actively disengaged. They're miserable at work and they spread their unhappiness to other colleagues. So even though a little more than 1/3 of workers are engaged in their work, these are actually the highest recorded numbers of engaged workers since Gallup started measuring in 2000, which is kind of interesting. And they say a lot of it is contextual. So I don't know if it's because people are feeling more grateful for their jobs, which is a good thing. But at work, many people feel unappreciated. Their opinions don't count. Their work's not meaningful. They're not making a difference. And there's a reason for it. And it's not that work in and of itself is inherently dissatisfying. It is rather we've created a society in which work, for most of us, is inherently dissatisfying. And interesting, if it goes all the way back, the trajectory began in the late 1700s with economist and moral philosopher Adam Smith's publication of Wealth of Nations. So most people in business or economics have heard of this, but in his book, he offers one of the first world's collected descriptions of how nations build their wealth. And along with this was the advent of the Industrial Revolution. And the adoption of this perspective led to the development of what was called scientific management, looking at jobs through a scientific lens, seeing people as replaceable parts in the machine of industrialization, and that people just could be replaced, right? And there became this focus on efficiency and productivity. And this has led organizations, managers, and supervisors to attempt to control their employees, right? To make them more efficient and productive, right? Fearing that if they're left to their own devices, they won't produce. To achieve goals by employing division of labor and other methods, and further reducing autonomy and discretion that makes jobs satisfying. So over time as a society, we systematically reduced most of the non-material satisfactions in our jobs. Our societies develop a shared unconscious assumption. Keep going back to this, right? Because I think, as we were saying, there's so many things that we've lost sight of and just have fallen below the surface for us. That the only way to get someone to do something is to reward them or threaten them with punishment, right? And this is called the carrot and stick approach. So this belief has led to an operative belief, except for special cases like teachers, musicians, artists, maybe athletes, people work for pay, nothing more, nothing less. So this belief has manifested in a society in which work has become structured in a way that provokes us to focus just on what we get paid, rather than upon what we actually do for our jobs, right? So if you think about it, how many of you were encouraged by others to get a job that pays well? Encouraged in college to major in something that would get you a good paying job? How many of you were encouraged to be practical when it came to looking for a job, not to follow your passion and dream? And I know all these things touched my life, where I was interested in sociology and told by my dad, like, what are you going to do with that? Ended up in finance because I was good at it. End up getting an graduate degree, end up working for Ford Motor Company in finance, bored to tears, but it was practical, gave me money. But luckily, I finally had the courage to jump and go get my PhD. So because of these social influence, most people, their aim becomes simply to get a job that pays a lot of money rather than one that fulfills them. Because of ways so many jobs have become structured, there's actually little reason to do a job outside of the pay one receives, right? So they're structured in such a way that they don't give us autonomy and other things we'll talk about. Any other reason someone might be motivated to engage in work has become neglected or eliminated by most organizations. So here's the good news. The idea that we're only motivated by money is not a capital T truth, I would call, right? So meaning it's not an absolute truth. It doesn't transcend time, space, history, all these things. It's not separate from a particular point in history or the circumstances we find ourselves in. And another way to say that is that it's a social construction, right? It's become true because as a collective, we've learned to believe it's true. We act as if it's true, and thus it's actually become true. And some of you might have heard of the notion of a self-fulfilling prophecy, right? So if we believe something enough, we act as if it's true, and then it becomes true, not because it's true in the sense an absolute truth. Said another way, because the work offered to us has become structured in a way that there is no reason to work except for money, most people end up only working for a paycheck. So we now find ourselves in a situation in which the majority of us have become deprived of a major source of fulfillment in our life. And interestingly enough, in spite of this reality, right, when someone says he's in it for the money, we're still being judgmental. So since we have come to structure our work, the way we've come to structure our work is a social construction, not a capital T truth, we can choose to act on alternative beliefs, right? And I think this acting on alternative beliefs, ways of thinking is fundamental to personal development and leadership development. We can create work that is satisfying and meaningful, that leads to personal fulfillment and allows us to be productive. We can create jobs in which workers are motivated by aspects intrinsic to the work in and of itself, right? We know that fulfilled workers are engaged in their work, lose themselves in their work, are challenged by their work, stretch outside of their comfort zones, have autonomy and discretion to achieve mastery and expertise, have meaningful relationship with coworkers and customers. And finally, most importantly, they find their work meaningful, that it makes a difference in the world. It makes other people's lives better. So at least in the short term, not everyone may be able to satisfy their heart's desire in their job, but everyone wants to feel useful or better yet enlivened by what they do all day long. So our hope at Your Story is that we can support individuals in finding or creating work that they find engaging, satisfying, meaningful, and fulfilling. So there are three elements of a job that motivate and engage us. And if you think about, you can reflect on your life and think about this. The first is autonomy, right? The ability to exercise discretion and judgment, right? We have some leeway. We're not being told what to do all the time. Mastery, the opportunity to learn and grow, right? That we can get better at something that matters to us. And finally, meaning. having a positive impact on others. So next I want to share a story from Amy Rezanowski's work and her collaborators' research on, she explores how people separate from their job descriptions create structure in their work, meaning how people on their own make their work more self-motivating and engaging. And actually, when I just read this story about a year ago, it just moved me so much. So they tell a story. One of the interviews was with a janitor named Luke, and he tells of cleaning a comatose young patient's room twice. He had done it once, but the patient's father, who had been keeping vigil for months, hadn't seen Luke clean the room because he was taking a cigarette break. He snapped at Luke that he hadn't. Luke's immediate response was to get defensive, and he had the urge to argue with the father. But amazingly, instead, he said he was sorry, that he would go clean the room. When I just heard that, it's like just how humble and how he did that. But what allowed him to transcend his ego, to let go of defending himself? It was his felt responsibility to care for patients and their families. But caring for families, let alone interacting with other human beings, was not part of his official job description, which included things like wet mop the floor and stairways, operate mechanical cleaning and scrubbing equipment, strip and wax floors and surfaces, collect and dispose of soiled linens. Had he been merely fulfilling the job description, meaning the way his work was structured for him, he would simply have explained to the father that he already cleaned the room, and perhaps to have brought in a supervisor to mediate if the father remained angry. But his purpose was to make patients and their families feel comfortable, to cheer them up when they were down, encourage them to divert them from their pain and fear. Luke's aim, in the language of Aristotle talked about having an aim in life like an archer trying to hit a target. It was consistent with that of his organization, right, of the hospital, promoting health, curing illness, and relieving suffering. So on his own, Lucas shaped his job and engaged in his work based on the overarching aim of the hospital, not simply his job description. So Luke's case demonstrates we all have the ability to craft our jobs to some degree or another. Luke's job allowed him to exercise broad discretion in how he completed his work, especially with the social interactions. Actually, there was nothing about social interactions in his job description. His interactions with patients and parents demanded empathy, good listening, perceptiveness of when to stay in the background and when to come forward, right? So they required exercise of good judgment. He had to learn over time, he could get better at it, interacting with patients. And of course, these interactions made his job meaningful. From this example, we can see that work in of itself might not be meaningful, especially in the job description, but the job may allow us opportunities to make it engaging based on how we choose to engage in it, right? So once again, we believe that we always have the choice in our lives, no matter what circumstances we find ourselves in. Going back to a little bit of Viktor Frankl's work, right? We can choose our response to any situation. We can always choose our attitude. Okay, so when we look at jobs, we can think of three ways we can engage our work. So first one is a job. When a person sees their work as a job, they enjoy little discretion, experience minimal engagement and meaning. And the person would switch jobs if given the opportunity to make more money. It would not encourage anyone to follow in their footsteps. Next is career. And I would say probably most of the people on this call see their work or pursue their work as a career. It's when a person, they enjoy their work, and it has more discretion and are more engaged. But even that they enjoy their work, their focus is on advancement and achievement. They see themselves on a trajectory that leads to promotion, higher salary, and better work. And this is what motivates them to perform. And ideally, wouldn't it be great if everybody for work was a calling? If it's the most important part of their life, they're pleased to be doing it, it provides them with great satisfaction, is a vital part of their identity, and they believe their work makes the world a better place. And they would encourage friends and children to do the same kind of work. So what determines how people think about approach their work? Well, a great deal, of course, has to do with the work in of itself. And these three things to, I think, remember all the time, right? Does it allow autonomy, right? Do you have choice and discretion? Does it allow you to get constantly better at it, try to master it? And does it provide meaning? Does it positively impact others? But regardless of the job, there always exists some level of discretion on which we can move beyond our job descriptions, to exercise judgment, to attempt to get better and better at some aspect of our work, and to see meaning in our work. So our hope is if companies and managers are able to escape this unconscious operative assumption that often traps us, that people are only motivated to work for money, they could structure work and jobs in a way that draw on the understanding that high performance and satisfaction at work are actually driven by our deeply human needs to direct our lives, to learn, develop, and create new things, to be better by ourselves and others, right? So thinking when we start to structure jobs, if we believe in people in these three things, how might the world look differently? And if we use this criteria to chase a job that we want. So this is the last week of the semester for me, and in the last class of the semester, we often talk, what was most impactful in the semester, what happened over the course. And one of the students said that one of the things that was most helpful to her personal development was the questions I asked that she would never ask herself. So in that spirit, we'd like to ask you and offer you some questions regarding your engagement at work. So in screen, we want to give you 5 minutes to consider these questions. The first set has to do with job crafting your present job, as Luke had done. And the second about trying to find work that would be a calling. So whichever of these questions, are most relevant to you, may just jot down some notes on them for yourself. Okay. Sorry for the little time. We want to honor your time. And we can send you those questions. We'll be recording this video if you want the questions. And then we have another set. So we believe, right, it's not enough just to have an insight about things in your life, but actually to think about actions, right? Actions is what we want to do in the end. Try to deepen your learning, forward your action, and then learn from your actions. So here's some questions to consider with respect to action. Give you a couple minutes.
One moment. Thank you for your patience. We're just having a bit of a delay on the slide deck, so I'm going to start sharing again.
Yeah. So this could be in your current work or seeking new work.
So as you wrap up this reflection and thinking through what actions you may commit to move towards a calling, we'd also love to hear from you what you're taking away from today's session, whether it's an action item, a new perspective, a new understanding about yourself. We'd love to have you drop those thoughts in the chat to share with those on the call today.
Yeah, I think we understand some people might have to drop off. We're going to finish up with a couple more slides and then we'll stay on if anybody has any questions.
Thanks for sharing, Martina. A way to envision a new path. Reflecting on work and trying to make it a personal and intentional choice. And you are correct in saying that there is no one prescription. There is no one right answer. This is a very specific and personal decision, which requires self-reflection. And this is exactly why that's a part of the approach, to look inward, to focus your attention on your experience and further your understanding of yourself, so you can make decisions that, as Richie mentioned in the chat, are aligned to your values, your purpose, and can hopefully find alignment with the work that you do, whether that be in the organization's values or just the type of work that you choose to engage in. And so as we wrap up today's session, feel free to continue to drop your thoughts in the chat. We just want to reiterate that your story is here to help facilitate the development and well-being of performance practices that will hopefully allow folks to realize their purpose and live and move towards a fulfilled life. We believe that discovering this purpose, this calling, and creating one's story can be facilitated through a structured process and supportive community rather than waiting to stumble upon it. So like today, We'll be offering a number of resources to help here that encourage you to be curious about yourself, for you to experiment and take action in the way that you live, and then reflect and learn on those experiences so you can use purpose and your calling as your North Star as you look to make decisions in life. So we'll be offering trainings including dealing with anxiety, realizing your purpose, building resilience, and changing your relationships in the future. And in the short term, we'll be offering our first program called Creating Your Story, which will be kicking off on January 4th in the new year. This will be a 10-week all virtual program designed to help you create a purpose-driven narrative. This would serve as your North Star and compass as you look to live with purpose. And as it relates to this conversation about work, can be used in interviews to help you tell your story about what it is that you want to get out of life and how it is that you want to have an impact. So for those of you that joined today, we have a special offer for 20% off enrollment. I'll share details in the chat about that. But most importantly, we want to just build this community and stay connected with you all. So please feel free to follow us on social for updates, stories, and perspectives. And we'd also love to hear from you before you all hop off today. What might be helpful for you on your journeys? Any topics that would help to facilitate your personal growth and development would be really interesting to us, and we'd love to continue to host these types of sessions. So as Matthew said, thank you so much for your time this afternoon. We really appreciate all of the engagement and discussion. And Matthew and I will remain on the Zoom call for a few more minutes to answer any questions that folks may have.
Yeah, thanks again for attending. We greatly appreciate it. Great to see so many familiar faces.
Thank you all for joining. Happy Friday.
Thanks, guys. Good luck. This was great.
Hey, thanks, Dan. Appreciate it. Good to see you.
Thanks. You too, Matthew.
Richie. Yeah.
I see we have a question, so feel free. You can either ask it in the chat or come off mute and share it now as folks are dropping off. All right, Matthew, I don't know if you're looking at the chat, but we've got just a question about a student who's graduating this year, who has no idea how to start a job or a job search that would be suitable to her. Just trying to navigate that job search process as an independent woman and finding, work as a calling. And I think there's probably no short answer to this question, but I'll let you share your initial thoughts.
Yeah, it's interesting. A lot of work is trying to understand what you're passionate about, moments when you're most alive. So there's a large process of things that inhibit us, hold us back. As Comfort said, right, it's not easy for everyone to follow their purpose, which is true. I think there's more and less inhibitors to that. So we see it as a kind of a process, an iterative process of trying to understand yourself better, trying to understand inhibitors in your life, things that enable you. And then we talk a lot about experimenting with different things so you understand yourself better, and then expanding your realm of relationships, right? Because often who we hang out with is not necessarily who we want to become. and people see us in certain ways who we were in the past, and we want to become someone different. So all these things, even becoming, you know, as you say, an independent woman, like what does that mean to you? What's that look like for you? And how would you step into that? So a lot, like we talk about, you know, understanding ourselves and then taking some action and then moving towards that. So as Ariel said, there's not one question for that. I think another big part of it is community, you know, like-minded communities. And I think able to create that in the classroom, and we're hoping in this virtual space also, because what's most powerful, as Ariel was saying, is put the person at the center, and then people who have similar experience going on that journey with you and realizing you're not the only person. Everybody has the same fears, anxieties, stresses, desires, and hopes too. So I've found, you know, trying to create a community and facilitate that's one of the most powerful things in the development. So that was kind of a long-winded answer to that question, but hopefully, and we could talk more offline about you as an individual if you'd like.
Yeah, I will provide our contact information so folks can get in touch with us after the session. But while we're here, Matthew, we have another question about how to make purposeful work satisfactory from a financial perspective. I know this was a topic today about, you know, how do we have our cake and eat it too? And I don't think they're mutually exclusive, but maybe you can talk to us a little bit about your perspective and how some may view those as competing priorities.
Yeah, so I think that's interesting. This is a little bit what we're trying to say, and this guy Barry Schwartz says, you know, we're taught to be practical and everything's about efficiency and productivity. But he says actually people work harder when they have a purpose, right? So a lot of his work is saying we really need to make work more meaningful, more purposeful, those three things: autonomy, ability to grow, and stuff like that. So I think one of the things is trying to figure out like what you're passionate about doing, and then what jobs have that characteristics, right? So for me, it's really about helping people realize their potential. So I think I could be a psychiatrist, I could be passionate about rowing, I could be a rowing coach. So there's a number of things. In the end, I think being a professor is ultimate for me, but that took a long time to get there and moving towards it. So sometimes that's, you know, he would say, and I agree, it's a roadblock. We just don't believe our work can be meaningful. And in Ariel's case, right, I think right on the precipice, like what do you do when you're really passionate about something? And it does take a leap, and a leap of faith. And one of the things they also talk about is once you decide to go for your passion, people start to come around you to support you because they know what you want. And I think we're experiencing that a little bit as we start this venture. So there's no definitive answer to that. I think there's beliefs and then stepping into those beliefs, and it's a longer process. Doesn't happen overnight. And for different people, that can happen at different rates, depending on their courage. So once again, that would be a long question to answer. And you know, usually if we can sit down with a person, ask them questions to help them understand how they're thinking about it and what's possible. You know, so I call that, you know, providing distinctions and possibilities. But that I would never tell anybody what to do. I would help them explore the possibilities. And I would say even in my interactions with Ariel are kind of in that, you know, similar kind of vein.
Yeah, Jennifer, I can just share on my personal experience. I think that has been one of the internal beliefs that's held me back is, you know, the risk and fear of what if from a financial perspective. And as I've started to do this work, you know, this isn't a recommendation to quit your job, eat, pray, love, and make significant life changes. It's just taking small steps, making iterations, experimenting in your life to see what's going to be a good fit. And I work full time, so I'm able to provide that financial stability for myself, which at this point I know is important, but I've also recognized that that means of working is not my calling. And so outside of that 40-hour work week, I'm creating a space for myself to connect with folks like Matthew and you all who are really energized by this work and topic. And I think, as Matthew said, from there you attract like-minded people. And I hope that, one day this will provide the means for me to fulfill my calling. And, I think what can get in our way sometimes is the fear that prevents us from taking the leap. But like Matthew said, it's not a wholesale, change, and it's a very personal process that is iterative, that you continue to learn from, and takes time. I myself, it took me 5 years to get to this stage of having the context and courage to make the decision to even pursue this business. And for me, the next step will be, being an independent entrepreneur and not having that safety net of a full-time job. So I can relate fully to that question.
Yeah, I just think in summary, what's one thing you can do that's not too scary to move towards it, right? So taking steps towards, and not thinking that it has to be a clean tear, jumping right in, but like, how can you take steps? And I think, as Ariel said, 5 years and now this, it's steps of moving towards, and then hopefully you end up there. Some people jump, but not many jump, freely.
And I saw we had one other question in the chat about the program and what kind of results would come from it. So it's a great question. The first offering that we have available is a 10-week program that will be delivered all virtually through a learning management system called Teachable. We are piloting it right now with 10 people, and it's promoting great discussion and facilitation amongst the folks that are participating. We would be delivering short weekly podcasts where Matthew and I talk. He presents some of these new perspectives and distinctions to get you to think differently about life, challenging some of those common sense ways of relating to the world that we've just come to accept as truth. And each week is a series of self-reflective activities and questions so you can get more curious about yourself, in partnership with a call to take action. So not only do we want you to reflect on your experience and past and present, but we want you to be able to commit to taking action and actually live that out, and then have an opportunity to see whether that is aligned or creates the impact that you would like. And all of that, again, the 10-week program culminates in you developing a purpose-driven narrative. So this will be a purpose statement and a story that you can carry forward and use in every aspect of your life. I have used this in interviews. I'm now using it as part of the development and reason for starting this business. For me, it's been a more meaningful way to connect with people in my life, for them to understand who I am, what my values are, and what my unique impact in the world is, and what I intend it to be. And I am sharing the link and code to that program in the chat now for those who are interested. I think, given the way we're all relating to one another right now, we're finding that the discussion in this virtual environment has been a really rich way for us to still keep that community and continue conversations like we're having today.
Yeah, I appreciate Carrie's comment. I've a number of students this semester probably in that same situation, and they'll be writing their story here at the end of the semester. But yeah, so much of, I think of it is starting to understand what drives our thinking and behaviors, and what we even can see as possible, and then trying to imagine. And this is at all different states in our lives, but I think meaningful to anybody. Good to see you, Emily. There, I see.
I know folks are starting to drop off, but if anyone has any other questions, feel free to drop them in the chat or come off mute. We'd love to hear from you all. And Emily, I provided the coupon code, and we'll certainly be sending out more communication after the event as well.
Awesome, thank you.
Good to see you, Emily.
You too.
All right, well, I don't see any more questions in the chat, Matthew, so just want to thank everyone again for joining us today, and hopefully we'll see you all in the future for additional sessions that we'll have up and coming.